and welcome back to Love Your Food. This week we have a really interesting recipe for you. We're making our own breakfast sausage. As you can see here, we've just done it in a patty style. So much like you would find in your grocer's freezer, you would cut these into patties to cook. If you have one of the extruders, you can always make your own cased sausage, but we're going to start with some pork. We're using pork butt. We have some pork fat that we've trimmed off separately. Our spices are going to be some finherbe, some pepper, clove, and hot pepper. We have a little bit of salt, some dried sage, and some garlic. We're also going to be tossing in a little bit of beer at the end. This is a homebrew from a friend of ours. It's sort of an old country style ale, delicious. Adds a really nice accent to everything. So first things first is we're going to get our meat ready. We want to measure everything out. We want about 20% fat and 80% lean for this, so we're going to do it by weight. We're starting with our fat, and we're going to aim for about 250 grams of this. Now, of course, this isn't pure fat. As you can see, there is a little bit of meat in here as well, so we're going a little high on this, and then we're going to do about 1,000 grams of the lean, and that will come out to somewhere around 20%. It doesn't have to be super exact, but as you can see, we've got about 260 of the fat. Now for the lean, we're going to be doing, as I said, about 1,000 grams. So you're going to set your scale back down to 0 and keep adding until you get up to 1,000 grams. Now, we didn't have quite enough of the fresh, so we added a little bit of frozen, which is good actually, because while you're making sausage, you do want everything to be as cold as possible. You don't want the fat to melt and render out. It makes things a little more complicated. You also want all the parts of your grinder. You can see here we're at 1,000 grams perfectly. You also want all the parts of your grinder to stay cold, so those are going to come out of the freezer. So we're going to add in the hot pepper, the peppercorns. We also have a little bit of clove in there. Very small amount of clove. And now we're going to chop the garlic. This doesn't have to be a particularly nice chop or anything. It doesn't have to be fancy. We just want to be able to distribute it through the sausage so that it's not all in one clump. So here we go. We're going to add in the garlic. On top of that, we're going to add our finherbe. Now that is a combination of herbs, typically rosemary, sage, and parsley. This is our dried sage, and also our salt. So we're just going to add a generous little coating of salt to everything. After that, we're going to measure in our beer. As usual, all of the amounts are going to be in the description below. And we're just going to give everything a good mix so that everything's well combined. All of the herbs and spices are well distributed through the mixture. And again, you want to make sure that everything stays pretty cold, so you don't want to handle it for too long. So once that's all done, we're going to let that sit for a little while. The very cold frozen bits are going to sort of lower the temperature of the warmer parts. Now we're going to assemble our grinder. We have the meat grinding attachment for our KitchenAid. All of this has come directly out of the freezer. So in goes the auger. We're going to attach the blade to the front of that. And then from here we have 2 different sizes of die for the front. We're going to use the larger one to start. And if you don't like the texture, once the large one's done, you can then move on to the smaller one. If you're fine with the texture after the large one, you can stop there. It's all up to you. If you're doing it in a smaller casing like a breakfast sausage, you may prefer to do it through the smaller one. So we're going to get the front attached. We're going to turn that on to a pretty low speed. It's not going to go much past 2 or 3 on your mixer. There are also hand crank versions of this if you prefer to do this manually. And we're just going to start adding our mixture. And once again, you want to make sure that everything is staying pretty cold. So you want to handle everything the least amount possible. So as you start pushing your mixture through, it's going to start grinding and coming out the front of your meat grinding attachment. Please don't stick your hand in there. That is what this little plunger is for. So you're going to be pushing the meat through with the wooden plunger. And here you can see it coming out. So this is about the texture it's going to come out. The fat, because it's cold and it's not melting and it's not rendering yet, which is what you want, will sometimes get a little bit caught up in your blade and get caught in the die a little bit. Just grab a spoon and you can pull it out that way. It's fine. It's a little bit annoying, but it is just a side effect of the process. So once you've got all of your meat through there, you can see here it is pretty much stopping. So we're going to turn off the mixer. That is all of the meat. We're just going to give that a slight mix because we do want to make sure that it's all well distributed. Sometimes it will clump a little bit, so we just want to make sure that it's all mixed together. It's not big chunks of anything together. We've got a good hot pan here. Now is a great time to taste it. Even before, even if you're not happy with the texture and you want to go smaller, it's still a great time to taste it to make sure that you don't want to adjust the seasoning at this point. And if you do, then now's a great time to do it before you grind it again. So we're going to take this apart. You can see some of those little bits of fat stuck in the die there. We're also going to clean off any little bits of meat that are caught in the grinder parts. And then you want to wash these right away, and especially if you think you're going to do another layer or another level of grinding. Again, you want to make sure that all of these parts are ice cold. So once these are off your mixer and clean, they go right back into the freezer. So here you can get some of the little bits off the die, and then you're going to get your blade off. And here you can see where some of those the stringy bits of fat have just gotten caught around the blade, and they're just a little bit stuck. That's fine. So that can go right into your mixture. Most of that is fat, so when this cooks, it will render. It'll be just fine. So while we were doing that, we're just letting this sort of test patty cook. We just want to see how it tastes. So it's done on one side. You see we've got some great color on there. Meanwhile, we're going to flip it over and get the last part out here. This is the auger. As you can see, almost all of the meat mixture came out. If there's anything stuck inside, we actually had a peppercorn stuck inside the grinding attachment. And yeah, just take that off. It's again, it will mix in nicely. If it's not exactly the same texture, that's fine. And if you're going to be grinding this again, you would be putting that in first. So we're going to flip that out of the pan. You can see we've got some nice color on both sides now. This is a great time to taste it and see if we want to adjust any seasoning. You can see that's cooked all the way through. Still nice and juicy and absolutely delicious. So we put that directly into the freezer so that everything would, again, just combine and get back together, and all of the fat would solidify again. We don't want to handle this too warm or the emulsion will break. You'll get sort of fat running out. And we're just going to shape this into a 2. Again, like I said near the beginning, it's very much like the patties that you would get at your grocer in the freezer section, where it's just a tube filled with sausage meat, and you would just cut it frozen. So once you've got it into roughly the shape you want in your plastic wrap, we're just going to roll it over and just shape it gently. Now this is, again, pretty cold. We did take it out of the freezer. So it's solidified quite a lot, and it's pretty easy to manipulate, but it will hold its shape very well. So once you've got it roughly in the shape you want, just squeeze the ends together of your plastic wrap. You do want to kind of make the ends a little bit abrupt. You want to make them pretty straight. You don't want them to taper off too much. And just give it a little roll, and there you go. I mean, that's really it as far as getting it shaped and into a tube. And we had enough for 2 of these, so we put one in our chest freezer and one in our regular freezer just for use. And here it is frozen. So this was a couple days later. This is after it had frozen absolutely solid. And we're just going to cut a few patties off of this. Now, the nice thing about these homemade sausages is you can really control how thick the patties are when you're making your own breakfast sandwiches or breakfast or whatever. And so we're just going to cut some nice thick slices of the completely frozen sausage. You can see there that nice sort of uniform color inside. It is frozen solid, but it's going to go straight frozen onto our nice warm pan. And we're just going to let that cook. This is going to be part of a breakfast sandwich, so we're going to try and squish them down a little bit so that they'll cover the whole biscuit. And you do want to cook it pretty slow because you want to make sure it cooks all the way through and there's not frozen parts in the middle while the outside is cooking. So just keep an eye on the temperature and make sure it's cooking all the way through. You can see we're getting some pretty good color here. So this is once it's cooked all the way through, we're adding a little bit more heat and making sure you've got some color on the outside as well. And that's it. That's the whole recipe. Very, very simple. Does require a little bit of specialized equipment. You do need a meat grinding attachment to a food processor or a hand crank or something like that. But makes for absolutely delicious sausage. And of course, you can change that flavor profile however you like to personalize it to your own taste. So, if you like this recipe, please do like and subscribe. And if you have any recipes you'd like to see Chef Caleb try on the channel, please let us know in the comments below. And remember to love your food.